My name is Tom Harris, and this is Exploratory Journeys. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. David Wojick, Ph.D. of Virginia, is an independent analyst working at the intersection of science, technology, and policy, and he is my guest today. Dr. Wojick has a Ph.D. in the philosophy of science and mathematical logic from the University of Pittsburgh and a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Carnegie Tech. He has been on the faculty of Carnegie Mellon University and the staffs of the U.S. Office of Naval Research and the Naval Research Lab. Dr. Wojick is a former consultant with the Office of Science and Technical Information at the U.S. Department of Energy, which is totally related to our topic today, in the area of information and communications science. David has written thousands of articles, many in easy-to-understand layman's language, and I encourage people to click on the link below, and you can hear and read, actually, David's articles on the website of the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow. So welcome to the show, David.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Now, just a personal question. I was interested. Wojick, according to what I've read, is a Polish name. Did your ancestors come from North America to Poland, or the other way around, from Poland to North America?
Yeah, well, my grandparents, actually, which is pretty close when it gets to ancestors. Yeah, my father's parents were Polish farmers.
Oh.
In fact, my father's mother never learned English, so I think my interest in language came from listening to him talk on the phone.
Yeah,
in Polish.
Yeah, that's a tough language to learn. Wow. I worked with a fellow. His name was Arek, A-R-E-K, which was apparently the Polish equivalent of Eric. And it was quite fun to try to learn a bit of Polish with all those consonants.
Yeah. Well, the one thing about the Poles is that they were very strong in mathematical logic. In fact, when Russell and Wittgenstein were inventing it here in England, the Poles were at the same time. Nobody knew about it, of course, because it was, nobody knew about it until after the First World War.
Right. Now, I understand you live in, you call isolation, surrounded by national forests with no human contact, except when you buy groceries every 2 weeks. So where do you live exactly? It certainly sounds nice.
Well, it's remote, but it's only, as the crow flies, I'm just 100 miles from Washington, D.C. If you go west, you get you cross the Shenandoah Valley, and then you're in the big mountains, and it's George Washington National Forest. It's very nice.
Oh yeah.
So I live on the internet, is the best way to put it. I was thinking about it. I don't believe I have attended a physical meeting in over 4 years.
Huh, wow.
But I'm active around the world.
Yeah, but I take it then you're not too worried about COVID.
Well, we take our precautions. I've had to stop greeting the express people, the FedEx people, and we leave the packages alone for 3 days and things like that. I certainly have not had to go through the hell that a lot of people have gone through.
Oh yeah, we're on shutdown here in Ottawa, and just across the border in Quebec, they have a curfew. If you're out beyond 8 p.m. in the evening, you can get a $7,000 fine and a year in jail.
Yes.
Man.
I have written some stuff actually comparing the COVID panic to the climate panic, because as far as I'm concerned, they're both just outrageous panics with the government just going nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Anyway. I was analyzing the Spanish flu. One of my ancestors died of that, and the per capita death rate was more than 100 times that of COVID. So, yeah, it sort of puts it in perspective.
I don't think we know what the death rate is, quite frankly. I was looking at some stats yesterday in the U.S., and there are no more deaths at this time this year than there were a year ago.
Huh.
Okay, so a lot, I believe a lot of of people are dying and being classified as COVID deaths when they're not.
Yeah, I
know
be
the
surprised.
Italians did a study at one point and found that only something like 12% of the people that were being reported as COVID deaths were actually COVID deaths.
Yeah, it does look. It looks pretty suspicious when your flu rate goes way down.
Yeah. Well, somebody said we've only had 64 cases of flu so far this year.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right. Anyway,
yeah.
Tom,
what does a
we could do a session on COVID. Let's
Yeah, exactly. It's tempting. So, what does somebody with a Ph.D. in the philosophy of science and mathematical logic? What did you actually do your thesis research on?
Well, the kind of philosophy I'm in is called analytic philosophy, where analytic means concept analysis, and we're looking particularly at what are called conceptual confusions, and I discovered fairly early on there's no lack of those in the public policy domain. So in a sense, I'm still doing analytic philosophy. But my PhD thesis was on the confusions that occurred during scientific revolutions.
Oh, okay.
The reason, and it's applicable to very much to the climate thing, because what I wound up saying is that the meanings of the words we use are based in part upon our beliefs. And so Kuhn pointed this out. He said that when you have a revolution, you have the two sides of the debate, and they don't speak the same language because, their beliefs are so fundamentally different. We have that today. I mean, if you look up the definition of global warming, ask Google or whoever, a lot of the definitions you'll find say that it's caused by humans. Okay, so it's no longer a scientific question to the alarmists. It has become a matter of something is true by definition.
Yeah.
And that's when false beliefs become embedded in the language, that's really tough. And that's where we are today.
That's sad, yeah. Now, it's interesting. I took a course called The Science Wars with Professor Stephen Goldman of Lehigh University in Chicago, and he maintained that there was no such thing as truth in science. Now, what do you think of that? I mean, the idea that it's all simply opinion based on observations and interpretation.
Well, I think it's a conceptual confusion.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and not a new one, actually. I call it Descartes' fallacy, not because Descartes committed it, but because Descartes identified it.
Oh, yeah?
As he put it, the fact that everything we believe can be false is not evidence against anything we believe.
That's true.
But the idea that just because it's our beliefs, it can't be true, is an example of that confusion, I think.
Oh, okay.
You can believe there's this pesky thing called reality. All right, and that's truth. That's where truth comes from. So, you can believe you can walk through a brick wall, but reality is going to explain to you that your belief is not true.
Yeah. So there is truth in science in that sense.
Yes, I'm what's called an objectivist. I believe that and in fact, I think we've learned a great deal with using science, and all of which, or most of which, is true. Some of it could be false, but I'm pretty sure the sun exists. I'm pretty sure, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So generally speaking, getting onto the energy field, what do you think of President Biden's focus on phasing out fossil fuels in favor of wind and solar? I mean, is that even possible?
Well, it's nuts, and no, it's not possible, at least not with the technologies we have today. Not unless he wants to build, a huge number of nuclear power plants, which is not in the cards. But you can't do it with wind and sun. That's actually been a focus of my research. There's no present cure for intermittency. When the wind doesn't blow for 5 or 7 days and the sun doesn't shine reliably at night, there's no place to get the juice except by either using nuclear power or by burning something.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it's interesting. You wrote an article for CFAC, and we'll put a link to it up right under the podcast. It was about how California has hooked up the largest battery by far in the world. Can you tell us more about this? Oh,
yeah. This is what has been the focus of a lot of my research for the last, I'd say 2 years. until last week, actually, I believe it was, the biggest battery in the world was in Australia, and it was built by Tesla, interestingly enough, and it was 129 megawatt hours. Because it's important, the way you measure quantities of electricity in kilowatt hours or megawatt hours. I use megawatt hours. This was 129.
Okay.
California just fired one up with 1,200.
Oh.
So it's almost 10 times bigger than what until recently was the biggest one around. And it's a good sized battery.
Now, I understand they're saying, at least publicly, that it's for storage when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. But you're saying that's not really the case. That's not really the real reason for it.
No, that's not what these batteries are for. And because if it was what they were for, they'd be useless. The California battery, if California went, if the wind and the solar, if all the electricity stopped, that battery would keep you going for 103 seconds.
Jeez, and it's so huge.
As I like to put it, maybe you could find a flashlight in that time. But that's not what it's for. In fact, the Australian battery has made so much money that they're increasing it by 50%. And the California battery, the people that own that have a contract with PG&E, the big utility there, and they're both for the same thing. It's stabilizing the grid. I call it stabilization. That's the technical term. You've never heard of it because it's called ancillary services.
Oh yeah.
in the electric power industry contracting world, yeah. So which doesn't sound like keeping the lights on, does it? But no, the problem is that maybe I'm getting ahead, but wind especially, but also solar. If you've got a lot of cloud and all, the irregularity becomes so abrupt and so strong that it actually destabilizes the grid. What happens is you can't keep that 60 cycle the 60 cycles going.
Right.
And our electronic stuff is so sensitive that if you get just a tiny fraction of a cycle off, everything goes to hell. And so the frequency used to be sustained very simply by the huge rotors in the fossil fuel generators. And the nuclear generators, of course, and all the steam generators.
Right.
Those things are spinning. They're made, hundreds of tons, and they're spinning along. And if there's a little drop or something like that, they just don't even know. They absorb it. But as we have phased out those power plants, the irregularity, the instability of the wind and solar signals has become a problem to the point where we have to actually buy these huge batteries and hook them up. Because they can supply electricity instantaneously when it's needed.
Right. Now, there's a lot of hype, and I've even seen utilities put out stuff saying, "Oh, now you can have dinner to solar power" and things like that. That's just not what's going on. That's nonsense. So, is there an upper limit beyond which the grid becomes unstable if you're powering with wind and solar? Like if it's more than 20 or 30%, are you running into that trouble?
Yeah, the Australians are already in that trouble, and they in fact still have a lot of coal. They get more power, a higher percentage from coal than we do, but they have gotten so. That's one reason I'm very active in Australia, as a matter of fact, because I went over there to watch what was happening. Because they're getting used to blackouts, they're getting used to brownouts, and they're getting used to close calls. Now we're getting a lot of close calls. Of course, the utility's not going to send a message out and saying, "Hey, guess what? Your power almost went out an hour ago."
Huh.
But it's true, and they are reported. They're reported to the feds, actually.
Yeah. Now, is it true then that there is some upper limit to the fraction of your total electricity generation that can be from intermittent wind and solar? Like, is 20%?
Without something else stabilizing the? Yeah, probably. In fact, I wouldn't think it would be all that high, but that's not a question I've ever investigated.
Yeah. Now, what kind of batteries are these? I mean, you think in your mind of AA batteries. Is it like millions of those, or what is it exactly?
Well, the standard